Tatum African American Resource Center of the Toledo Lucas County Public Library proudly presents the Edrene Cole Oral History Project. This unique undertaking spotlights the Edrene Cole Collection, a compiled oral history of film and transcriptions. This special collection is named after the late Edrene Cole, a local historian and educator who devoted much of her life to documenting and sharing the stories of noteworthy Toledoans in the African American community. With the Oral History Project, the Tatum Center honors Cole's memory and continues her work. Join us and University of Toledo anthropology professor Dr. Willie McKether as Toledo's very own African Americans share the rich stories of their lives.
In this segment, we are going to be talking to Toledo's award-winning pianist, Claude Black. Mr. Black, welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for meeting with us today. What would you like to tell us about your early life, your early childhood?
We had a family tragedy. That's the way my life really started. And I feel that that's what I really got focused into the music, and I'll explain that. One night, I don't remember the month, I would have to say around 1944, somewhere in there. I'm not sure about the year because it's been so long. My mother had been out, and she came in, I would imagine, about 1 o'clock, which was rather late. My stepdad was in bed. We were all asleep. My sister was in the room, and in her bedroom sleep, and I was in my bedroom sleep. We had a 4-bedroom house with an attic upstairs, which we had rented out to some friends of ours, and we had another doctor staying in the house in another room, a retired doctor, physician, and we were all asleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, and my mom came in. I was asleep, but I know she came in the home and went into bed. My father woke up, he got the gun, and he started shooting. He shot my mom about 3 or 4 times, and she ran upstairs and to the people upstairs in that attic. My sister must have ran out, and he killed her. And I woke up with the gunshots, and my door was ajar, just half closed, and I peeked through the little crack in the door, and I saw him put the gun to his mouth and pull the trigger. He fell down. He got up and shot himself in the head, and that was a traumatic beginning of my life. At 13 years old, my sister was 10 years old at the time, and I started playing the piano a bit. I started when I was about 8, when I was out to my grandmother's house, and we had a piano downstairs, and I used to practice on the piano and stuff a bit, and I remember my stepfather, he could play a little bit of the piano too. So we all used to play the piano. My mom didn't play, but I played, and my stepfather used to plunk around on the piano. Most people could play the piano a little bit back there in the early 40s and 30s and like that. So after that happened, and we buried my family and everything, I was left by myself, virtually with just myself. My grandmother took me over, which she had taken care of me since I was a little off and on, because I had spinal meningitis when I was born. And she had nursed me back to health, so I had stayed with her off and on. So I felt comfortable with my grandmother. And so after all that happened, I just got so very close to the music, and that's why I really never wanted to leave it, because my mom wanted me to be a physician, and I wanted to be a doctor also. But after that happened, I just got so close to the music until I decided that I was going to stay with it, since it had brought me through all this. And I could always just play and forget about all the things that had happened. So I decided that I was going to stay with the music. And that's how my career began.
So music became a refuge.
A refuge, yes.
For you.
And yes, it really It did.
So what was the year that you were born?
1932.
1932. What was your mom's name and your dad's name?
My mom's name was Susie Colbert. Her married name was Colbert. Her was it maiden name? Is that what you call it? Her real name. Her first name was Miss Susie Williams.
Okay.
Which is what I use for my ID when they ask me, "What was your mom's first name?" And I say Susie Williams, and they have that on record. But her married name was Colbert.
Okay.
And his name, my stepfather's name was Leroy Colbert.
Leroy Colbert.
Yeah, he worked at Ford Motor Company as a plant guard. We found out later as we began to try to figure out why he did this. We began to delve into his past, which we didn't know much about. We found out that he had been in prison for 6 years. My mom didn't even know this.
Okay.
For some kind of felony that he had committed. He had been in prison for 6 years, and when he got out, he got out on good behavior, and they gave him a job at Ford Motor Company as plant protection guard, which was a little unusual for a person that had a felony, but he had been a model prisoner, so we found all this out afterwards. You know?
Afterwards?
Yeah.
And this was in Detroit?
Yeah, Detroit, Michigan, yes.
Okay. So this incident greatly influenced you in terms of
it made me decide because I was torn between being a physician. I really wanted to be a doctor. I had thought about it. A lot of our friends, my mom's friends, were doctors, and I thought I probably might pursue that. But after that happened, and as you say, the music was such a refuge, I thought I'll just stay with the music. I enjoyed it so. My mom had started me with piano lessons very early on with her friend, a lady named Miss Shamwell. She was a school teacher, but she was one of my mom's friends, and she was a good a nice pianist, a very good teacher. A very attractive lady, I remember that. Very extremely, real tall, attractive lady, and but she was a good teacher. So I started with her at an age around, must have been about 8 years old. I must have been
8 years old.
Yes.
Okay, so you were already playing piano
a little
before,
bit. Yeah,
a little
I was
bit
playing
beforehand.
some. Yes.
So this just kind of encouraged it. Just.
Oh yeah, my mom always. I was also taking acting on the stage. I was going to acting on the stage also. Yeah, I did several plays.
Okay.
In the early years, at the Detroit Institute of Arts.
What was the inspiration for your mother asking you to be a physician?
Well, a lot of her friends were doctors, and we used to all go out to dinner. They had a place called the Gotham Hotel in Detroit. And every Sunday we'd go there and have these great dinners, and a lot of the doctors and some of the people would be there eating, and they just, plus my mother was kind of a socialite person. She used to go out with her friends, and there were 6 ladies that they had a club, and they would go out and socialize and go to different nightclubs. I remember some of them. Okay. Yeah, down what they call the Valley in Detroit. And they would go and just have a great time. She was friends with Joe Louis, and they were all friends. And they all used to go out. The Paradise Theater, we used to go there every week and listen to all the bands and stuff. My mom knew a lot of the band leaders and stuff, you know.
At 8 years old, you had a piano teacher.
Yeah, my mom started me with
piano teacher.
Yeah.
Now, when you were in school, what was that like?
Which school? Did you have high school or what school?
Elementary school, like when you were young and
now I went to school when my mom was alive. I went to school at Palmer Elementary School down on Horton and Bobian, right off of Bobian, down when I was living downtown with my mom.
In Detroit.
For a short while, yeah. I went to Palmer School.
Wow. And so
then after that happened with my mom at 13, then I moved out with my grandma, but I still went to high school, some of the high schools in Detroit. I went to Northern. Then I transferred to Cass Tech because they had a better music program. Okay. And that's where all the great musicians went to Cass Tech. So I thought I want to go to Cass too. So I went to Cass Tech. Yeah.
Who were some of those great musicians who were at Cass?
Oh my goodness, Donald Byrd, Herman Wright, Ray McKinney. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, and then a lot of classical musicians there too.
So
Yeah.
those were the people who were your classmates and
Yes.
schoolmates and friends.
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of Kirk Lightsey, who lives in Paris now. He lives in Paris. He's a great pianist also.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. That sounds like that was a great time.
It was a great time. It was a great, I mean, I think about now at my age now, and I can look back on all that, the times that I met Billie Holiday and accompanied her, and a lot of the musicians as time went on. Periodically, I would be exposed to these great musicians, either at the theater when my mom took me, or later on when I got a chance to start playing. I played at Baker's Keyboard Lounge for several years in the house band. I got a chance to meet some of the great musicians that came, coming out of New York. So yeah, it was a great time for me. I had a great life.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, going back to talking about your younger years in school, outside of school, when you were outside of school, what other kind of social activities did you engage in?
I was studying with LeClaire Knox, the LeClaire Knox theatrical. She taught drama and dance, ballet.
Oh.
And my sister was in her ballet class, and I studied the drama and the stage, acting.
Okay.
And I was in several plays.
So that was when you were younger?
Yeah, that was when my mom was alive. Yeah.
Okay.
I was in her drama class, and I also worked for her at home at her house. Her husband was a doctor, also Dr. Knox. And they had. My mom would say, "Well, Miss Knox would say, well, you send him over on Saturday. I want him to do my lawn." And I was very good at landscaping. I would do her lawn. She had a great big huge house and a lawn, a backyard in front. I would stay there all day and manicure the lawn and make it beautiful for her, because that was Miss Knox. That was my drama teacher I really loved. She was a great person. But she had a drama class, and we performed every year at what we call Juniors on Parade at the Art Museum in Detroit Art Museum. Museum of Art, they call it.
So what were race relations like when you were going through all of this time?
That's a funny thing about when you say race. I mean, I had a few incidents. I had one incident that I remember, but that me and my little sister, I'll tell you about that shortly. But for the most part, if you concentrated on your education, on the things that your mom taught you to do, and you minded your business, you had good manners, treat everybody with respect. This is what I was taught by my uncle, by my grandma, and by my mom before she died. You keep yourself clean as best you can. She taught me how to do all the things that I know now. I learned at a very early age, even before I went into service. So when I went into service, there was no problem, discipline and all that. My mother had taught me that. I had no problem with any of that. Okay. The only problem I had was getting up early at 5 in the morning. But other than that, I never had any problems, and I didn't have much problem with race, because I always look at people as humans, and everybody has different personalities. And what you have to do if you want to get along with people is just treat them with respect. Just pay attention to how they are. Some people like to be left alone. Some people don't want to talk. They're what they call introverts.
Yes, yes.
And they don't want to be bothered so much. And other people are like to mingle and to talk. And it's your job to find out what these people like if you want to get along with them. Especially if you in close, you got to work with them and stuff. Now I find that true now, even with musicians. And I don't have any problem. I go all over the world, and I don't have any problem with people now, because the ones that want to talk and be friendly, that's good. The ones that don't, I don't bother them. And a lot of times, my music, if I'm good enough, and what I call if I'm really on. They will gravitate toward me. The music draws people
Draws
in.
people in.
If it's the right kind of music and you're playing really good, you will attract people.
Okay. So when you were at Cass Tech,
Great school, one of the best in the country.
I hear wonderful things
Great school.
about Cass Tech.
Yeah, great school.
So when you were there at Cass Tech and you were playing music, all of that music then, could you say that drew just everybody? The school system, it was segregated, black, white? I mean, this is Detroit.
It was mixed school.
Okay. So everybody who was a musician then?
It took on special, generally the real special people with extra talent and stuff. Those are the people that mostly went there.
Okay.
They taught music, aerodynamics, and art.
Okay.
Those are the three things those are the majors there.
Okay.
And it was kind of a special school. I don't think they advertised it like that, but it had extra talented people. Like the School of the Arts here now, it was kind of like that.
Nice. Really nice.
But it was on college level.
Okay.
See, it was they taught on kind of like on the first year of college level. That's the level of education that was there.
Wow.
It was a great school.
So you learned how to read music and be able to.
I wasn't such a good
No?
reader. I was a slow reader because I always played. I just played, I just could sit down and play. Reading came really slow to me. It still does.
Okay.
You
So
know.
do you think that reading helps or hinders you when you're
The reading music?
reading music when to
Well,
play?
you need to learn it. You need to
Okay.
really learn to read music because that's part of the music system.
All right.
And you need to learn the system. You need to know it, even though you may be slow at it or you may not particularly care for it. You need to know.
Okay.
Just like education. You may not like math, but you need to know the math. You need to know the English. I could tell you because I was very slow in things because I spent all my time when I was at Northern in the auditorium hanging out with some of my buddies. I won't call any names, but we spent our days in the auditorium over at Northern before I transferred. And I'll tell you about that. That was a whole segment about. We had some really great musicians come out of Northern High. Paul Chambers, a great bassist, went down in history. That played with Miles Davis, and he was from Northern. Doug Watkins, Donald Byrd went to Northern for a while before we transferred to Cass, and we had some really great musicians out of Northern High School.
Well, good.
Yeah, Tommy Flanagan went to Northern.
Wow.
Ella Fitzgerald's companies. He went to Northern.
Wow. So you really played with some people who were just top of their game.
I was around. Well, see, Detroit was at the time was turning out a lot of so many of them went down in history as some of the greats, some of the great musicians of our time, jazz musicians of our time. Yeah.
I want to ask you about your time in the military. Was that before or after you came to Toledo?
I was in the Army in 1952
Okay.
to 54.
Okay. And how did that come about? Did you enlist or
No.
what happened?
No, I was drafted.
Okay.
I didn't want to go.
Okay.
After I got in, I told them right from the get. I said, "Well, I don't shoot any people, firearms, and shooting folks and all that." I said, "I can't do that." So they kind of billed me as a conscientious objector.
Okay.
And while in there, going through this, I ran into a guy named, I think his name was Robert Smith, and Douglas Middleton. Now, Douglas Middleton's later on became one of the top female impersonators in Chicago.
Oh.
I saw his name in Jet.
Wow.
One year. I said, "Oh, I know him. That's Douglas." Now, the reason why I remember those two guys because they were also conscious,
Okay.
and so we got together and we said, "Well, what are you here for?" I said, "Well, we don't believe in fighting in going to war and stuff." So we said, "Well, we'll just play crazy, and maybe they'll let us out." So that's what we did. We thought, well, we're just off. And so they put us they separated us from the regular guys, and so they said, well, these guys are crazy as a loon. They don't believe in fighting and stuff. So put them over here. So they put us in a separate room, and Douglas, I think he got out.
Okay.
Robert Smith, they separated all of us.
Oh.
They put me in specials in the medics.
Okay.
Because that's where they put a lot of the people that were conscientious objectors.
Okay.
If you didn't want to fight, they put you in the medics.
Okay.
So that's what I think Robert Smith, I don't know what happened to him. Then I ran into him after we got out. I ran into him in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He later became a judge. He went to law school, and he became a judge. That's what happened to him. Douglas Middleton, he went on to Chicago. He was from Chicago. I saw his name in Jet. So
went on to a different.
Yeah, and I went to special. I ended up in the 279th Army Band.
Wow. Okay.
The reason I ended up in the band because I used to go when I'd get off in the daytime. I was working nights driving the ambulance. And I would get off, and my days were free, so I would go in town in La Rochelle, France, and go to the service club and play the piano. And one of the generals, people heard me, and they got me transferred to the Army band, unbeknownst to me.
Oh, wow.
They rescinded my orders, and I ended up in the 279th Army band.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, you said 55.
Yeah, 54 I came
54, you came
and went
out.
headed straight to New York, straight to Birdland.
Wow, you
Straight
went to Birdland.
Yeah, I got out in camp. What was the name of that? Fort. I can't remember the name of that camp. It's right outside of New York. It'll come to me in a minute. And I said, I'm going straight to Birdland. Got on the train or whatever that was, and that took me. I said, I want to go to New York City. Okay, you're on the right train. Bus, and so I think it was a bus. They took me into New York. I said, I want to go to Birdland. Got me a cab. I said, take me to Birdland. I took my bags and put them down in the bus station or somewhere. And I said, I want to go to Birdland. I went to Birdland. I got there around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they were having a matinee jam session. Bud Powell on the piano, Max Roach on the drums, and I think Curly Russell on the bass. It was the Bud Powell trio. I sat down to the table. I'll never forget this. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I think they started at 4. Sat down to the table just as you go, kind of walk downstairs and sit to the table. I sat there about, I'd say 7 to 10 minutes. Guess who walked in the door? Charlie Parker. Bird. And when he walked in and looked around. I'll never forget this. Looked around and he looked down at my table, brought us to come and sat down at my table and said, can I sit here? I said, yeah, sit down. I knew who he was. And put his horn on the table, took it out, and went up on the stage. And
What
he
an
certainly
experience.
did. Yeah, that's what happened to me. So I got a chance to see him.
So when you were in the Army, did you experience any problems with race in the Army at all?
Well, the only problem there wasn't a problem. It's just the situation was when I went in. As I said, I was in the 550 Medical Ambulance Corps. That's what I ended up in, and they shipped us off to Bordeaux, France.
Okay.
That's what my first station was. We went overseas, and the first platoon that I was in there was all black. It was the last black platoon before they integrated.
Okay.
And they were getting ready to integrate that. They were just waiting. It was a matter of like maybe 2 months. So they said, "Well, come on in. We're going to get we're going to go to barracks." But it was a tent city. It was all tents.
Wow.
It was all black, and that's what they did. They had tents, and then they switched. As they integrated and mixed, they put you in barracks. But at that time, everybody was in tents. So my life has been just one event after another. Some good, some bad, but never dull.
Never dull.
Never dull. There's always something happening in my life. It's been interesting, to say the least. My grandma took care of me. She did a great job of taking care of me. We had a restaurant. Aside from all the things that I was doing in the Army, I had to work with my grandma and my uncle. After my mom died, we had opened up a restaurant. We had a restaurant. My uncle decided he was a hobo.
Okay.
And when I was born, 1932, my grandmother said, "Well, you need to come in off the trains now." She says, "I'm going to buy this." She had a shack out on 8 Mile Road. And she said, I'm talking to my landlord, and there's half a block of property here for sale, and I'm going to try to buy this someday. She said, you need to come in and help. So he came in off the trains, and she ended up buying that property, and they ended up opening a restaurant. We had that from 1947 until 1967.
What was the name of the restaurant?
Ike's Barbecue,
Ike's.
out on 8 Mile Road.
Wow.
So aside from all the stuff I was doing, I had to work in the restaurant and stuff, take care of that, help my grandmother, because she was getting quite old, and she lived to be 98 years old.
Wow. Wow. So was it after your grandmother had passed that you came to Toledo?
No.
No?
I was coming out of Toledo all the time.
Yeah. Were you coming down to play?
Yeah, with Candy Johnson. Yeah, I was working here at the 3Ds Club.
Oh, tell me more about that.
That was out on Broadway Street, Broadway and South, I think it was, somewhere out near that area. I think there's a McDonald's right there next door to it now. Well, that was the 3D Club there. We worked for Willie Phillips, Candy. I was working with Candy Johnson, and his Peppermint Sticks.
And the Peppermint Sticks.
Yeah, that's the name of the band.
Nice.
So I was doing that, in and out. I had worked for Candy before in Detroit in the early years.
Wow. So you came down to play. When did you meet Clifford Murphy?
My grandmother used to bring me to Toledo in the early years, and I was going to church. My pastor built a church over here. It's called the House of Israel out on A and St. John Street.
A and St. John.
Yeah, he
What's
built.
the name of the pastor?
Pastor? Dr. Robinson, Jeremiah Robinson.
Okay.
He was our pastor, my grandma. And he's the one that kind of helped me through all this when my mom died, when all that happened. My grandmother joined his church. He was a great. I remember Dr. Robinson. He was a great little guy. He helped me through a lot of that stuff that I went through. My first experiences coming to Toledo was at church.
Okay.
That's when I met Clifford, because his father was a preacher too.
Oh, his father was a preacher too. So you met Clifford at church. And then what happened?
They threw us out. We went to the M&L. We were just, we tell that story now. Oh, gosh. Anyway, yeah, we ended up at the M&L, fooling around playing and stuff. Yeah. I don't remember the exact years on that, but it was way back there. It was so much going on, honey. I was into some of everything. I was doing some of everything.
So Clifford Murphy became your running buddy, sort of.
Well, not then, not back there then. No, we did later on.
Okay.
Yeah, we did later on. Right. No, we wasn't doing a whole lot of running then. Our parents would let us. We did do little things, but everybody was so young then, we didn't do a whole lot of stuff back then. And we didn't get that going until later.
Okay.
After we got grown. And
so was the playing here the impetus for you to made you decide to come to Toledo?
Yeah, well, I met some ladies, and I kind of started a little family while I was over here and stuff, and that was the beginning of my coming over here to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just kept coming and going. So finally I got tired of coming and going, and I just stayed.
You just decided to stay.
Yeah.
And settle down.
Yeah. But that was later on.
Okay. So that was so when you came to stay and have a family here in Toledo, that was before or after you started Murphy's, or how did that happen?
Murphy's Place?
Yeah.
Well, I joined Murphy. See, he started his band. I didn't start with him. He started his band. I don't forget the year. I don't really know. He can tell you more about that year. If you've interviewed him, you know the year that he started.
Okay.
I didn't start with him with the band.
Okay.
I was traveling with other bands and stuff. And then I guess I kind of got tired of moving around. So I said, Clifford, you might as well hire me,
Yeah.
So, so eventually he did hire me. I forget the exact year and stuff.
Wow. So how was...
But I've been with the band now from here. 22 years.
22 years.
Yeah.
So, another question. This is a family-related question, I guess I want to
Oh.
ask about the family you started when you came to Toledo. How was your, work life and home life, that kind of balance kind of thing? Like,
Well, it
your
was kind of rough,
children
of
and-
course, because I was trying to travel and move around and trying to do this too, And so it was kind of a back and forth thing. That's why, I say I ended up just coming here to stay eventually. I just came and stayed, I got my life to the point where I just came and stayed. Eventually, that's what happened. I stayed. That was down much later, down the line.
How many children did you have?
Sure. Oh,
Children.
my goodness. I don't even ask right now. No, I'll tell you about that. Yeah, I'll tell you about that later.
Later?
Yeah. Because I've lost two. Two of my twins died. They passed,
sorry to
and the
hear
mom
that.
just died 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
She just passed. My first wife. Yeah. So, yeah, I had a bunch of kids though. Yeah, from a couple of marriages.
Okay.
So what else you need to know there?
What else do I have? I think that is really that's
The basis
everything.
of it?
That's everything that I have to ask
Okay.
you. Anything you wanna that I didn't go
this-
over that you
I
want to
did.
know?
That pretty much covers things.
Okay.
I gave you from my very first, from 13 years old, and there were some things in there in between that I could probably fill in later on as I remember some of the dates of the things that happened. But from when my mom died at 13 and just progressed up, I went to high school. Ended up with my grandma. She took me over after my mama died. Finished raising me, and as I say, I worked in a restaurant. My uncle opened a restaurant, and everything went as smooth as it could be. My life. I tried to do. I was mostly playing. That's one reason why I didn't finish college, because I was jumping around playing all the time, different bands, and doing that sort of thing. Did a lot of traveling, going different places. I went overseas several times.
What college?
Different band. Pardon?
What college?
What college?
You said you didn't.
I went over. I didn't finish.
You didn't finish. But
I didn't go. No.
Oh, you didn't go.
No, I
Okay.
didn't. No. I was traveling. I started traveling with these bands and stuff. And I joined. I was with Paul Bascom in the early days, just out of high school, and I went with Paul Bascom and a show called Smart Affairs with Larry Steele. Now, I traveled with them for a little over a year. Smart Affairs of the 50s, I forget the year. And then from that, I left Paul Bascom and I went with Earl Bostic. That was in 1963 or something like that. And I was just on the move, I was moving. And went with Aretha around 65, when she made that Respect and all that. I was with her at the time. I left Aretha and, what I did, 70s, I was moving, traveling, and then I think it started with Candy again. And then eventually I joined up with Clifford. So you see, it was just on the move. Traveling, moving. I went overseas in 1980-something. I forget the name. I'll have to look on my records and see. I went over my first trip. Well, it wasn't my first trip, but it was, I went with Oliver Jackson out of New York City. We went to Switzerland, I guess it was the first. Bern, Switzerland was my first. Zurich. Then I came back and I went back again. And then the last tour I made with him again in the 90s, I went to Austria and I went to Spain, France, Austria, France, and Italy, and Switzerland.
Wow.
Yeah, that was my last trip overseas.
So it sounds like, though you had some rough starts and rough spots, you really had a really good life, would you say?
Yes, I've been really fortunate. The Lord's blessed me. He took care of me. through all that. He had to, because I could have very well ran out there that night, and I know he would have, you know, shot me also. But fortunately, I didn't wake up until it was just about over.
Okay.
The Lord has protected me and looked over me, seeing that I didn't want for much of anything. My grandmother, you know, she took care of me. Then I ended up taking care of her till she died, because she lived to be an old age. And I took care of her, and she lived to be 98 years old. She died in 1981.
Wow.
I took her up to Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was up there at the time. I thought that would be a good place. It was quite nice up there, and I had worked up there before. So I took her up there, and that's why she passed up there. I took care of her until she died, because she got to be quite old, and she needed a nice quiet. And I took care of her. She did all right.
Wow. Well, thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. You're welcome.